Hello, everyone, and welcome to another podcast. On this episode, I'm delighted to have Kael Coleman from the Protecdiv Insurance Brokerage based out of Philly.
Neil, thanks for having me. As I said, my name is Kael Coleman. I'm the CEO of Protecdiv. We're an insurance and reinsurance broker. We are focused on mainly on large commercial enterprises in the public entity space, both on the insurance and reinsurance side. We're a new company, having formed less than 2 years ago, and really officially launched this year in 2020. We're growing pretty rapidly. We've got 8 employees with a target of 100 employees within the next few years, and we're really pleased to be with you, Neil.
No, that's great. And just by background, we've been having a lot of conversations, a lot of great conversations around the digital risk spectrum. And normally this podcast, we talk primarily about cyber risk, either that's corporate cyber or personal cyber. But I wanted to change that a little bit, and really do a deep dive in just speaking with a friend to the company, a great broker that we know you are, and we're really excited to hear about your early achievements and what you're going on to achieve. But really, for this podcast, I wanted to speak about what COVID has had as an impact on your sort of new startup, really fledgling broker that's making great strides. I imagine the plans you had pre-COVID to what post has been very dynamic, and believe it or not, now we're sort of 9-ish months on. I'm really interested to know, from a broker standpoint, how has it changed obviously there's a corporate impact and we've all experienced that, but really, how have you felt, or what's changed from a business conducting impact? And that's what I really want to speak about today.
Yeah, well, so a lot of things clearly have been affected. We were probably more fortunate than many in that we formed as a digital broker.
Nice.
We kind of had been working from home, working remotely since we formed, and we put the technology infrastructure in place to be able to do that really easily and seamlessly. So for us, when COVID kind of hit and everyone had to kind of abandon the in-person office for really still obviously ongoing, that didn't affect our day-to-day work life, so that we were fortunate in that regard. But what it really did materially affect is our ability to get out and meet with people, meet with prospects and clients, and talk about their programs, talk about the things that they have going on, ways that we can help. And we still do lots of that over Zoom and Teams and various meeting platforms. But you do certainly miss that personal interaction. Some of those interactions you have that are kind of outside the meeting. Walking in the hallway, or the ability to get lunch or dinner together and kind of build relationships or build on relationships that you already have. And while Zoom and Teams are very effective for a lot of things, and I think even post COVID, when the world returns to normal, I think we're going to see still a lot more use of these kinds of platforms in the everyday business world. Particularly for the kinds of business that we target, where we're going after kind of Fortune 2000 companies, entities in the public entity space. Those relationships and that kind of trust based relationships that form a lot in face-to-face interpersonal meetings, you miss out on. So what I think has happened for in the broking world, that's actually made, at least in the short term, accounts a little bit more sticky with the current broker, the incumbent broker that's already in place, because there's so much change going on in the world right now that changing your broker is just another change. And I think a lot of folks for now are saying, what, let's just keep that the way it is, and we'll think about that in the future. So for us, as kind of a challenger broker, a new broker, that certainly has presented some challenges in that some of in the sales cycle, some of what the accounts we thought would have come on this year, we now project to come on next year. So there are some delays, but there's also been some positives. One being as you talked about, cyber. And certainly cyber insurance and reinsurance has been a growing market now. Is pretty a pretty significant market. But I would say probably up until recently, and probably still is the case in many instances, it's kind of an afterthought. People, companies are like, yeah, we should have it. Let's get something in place. But I think with the impact of COVID and so many people going from working in the safe, secure office to working remotely, and now you have thousands of more endpoints and more opportunities for there to be some kind of failure, that I think that has put cyber more in the forefront of people's minds. And for us as a new broker, it's it's something we talk a lot about with prospects and clients, and have found some new opportunity there.
That's awesome. And I think you took that such a big answer. Thank you so much. So you touched on some really important things there. I just want to kind of dissect some of them. I think you're right. One of the biggest challenges when we're in a relationship-based business, and brokers, we live and die on our relationships, really. It's very much a touch feel. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint for most good relationships. The people you serve, or your clients, will hopefully be with you for many, many years. So that, it's like breaking a marriage sometimes, or a very long friendship, when they go, look, you're just not doing enough for us. We're going to transition into a new relationship. And I think you're right that I think one of the biggest challenges of the digital economy that we're in now is being able to forge those relationships. If we already had a relationship, this is fine. But for business growing, for brokers that are trying to attract new business outside of kind of lack of maybe service, but for the bigger opportunities, such as you mentioned, it's very easy for a client to really stay with their kind of incumbent, stay with their current operation. As you say, they're really busy, as we all are in the world of COVID. So I think working on being very good at the digital economy, working in this kind of environment, but doing it in such a way where maybe you're using a lot of this for presentations, or doing things above and beyond just electronic sort of email communication. Definitely been something that sounds like it's served you well. And going back to your initial point, and it served us very well, because we're an underwriting agency, but we're an international underwriting agency. Our environment was digital anyway. We had people, we weren't all in the same office. We've got staff and underwriters across North America. We've got them in London, in Middle England, in Nottingham. So I think COVID has certainly been less disruptive on that footprint for companies such as yours and such as ours, that were already built with not the remote worker, but we weren't all under one roof, and we all communicated through platforms. Whereas I can imagine for some of the older companies that have worked in more of a traditional way, I would have thought that transition has probably been a lot more challenging. And then you're right as well, that you touch on the size of the digital risk landscape, and how that's had to naturally broaden by putting people into an environment that isn't working within the four walls of an office. And then you look at the different infrastructure impacts for businesses. And I was thinking, as you were talking, do you think that there's opportunity, or do you think that brokers should be servicing their current clients differently in this current climate? What I mean by that is that not only both on probably coverage concerns, but also the way that they actually communicate with them, because obviously you're unable to go to a board meeting, you're unable to do a presentation. Could you just articulate around? I'm keen to get your thoughts on that.
Yes, I think brokers should be kind of changing how they communicate, and that's not just COVID related, in kind of the inability to meet face to face, but I think brokers kind of made the move to kind of a quote unquote digital environment 20 years ago, when everybody got email, and that's been our digital environment pretty much since then. And with not a lot of real change to that. And and what that means is a lot of the way that we do business is over email. It's over kind of traditional file servers. It's trying to keep track of what's the latest version of X contract or policy, and we as brokers, overall need to move more into a fully digital, framework, a fully digital platform where we're using, collaboration, software and things like Zoom and Teams in particular, and some others have some of that built in. But I think most of the insurance industry right now is using these platforms for meetings like this,
Yeah.
maybe as a file server, but that's kind of about it. But there's a lot more that can be done, and a lot more that should be done to ensure that if we're going to be more digital, if we're forced to be more digital, that we're taking full advantage of that and making everyone's life a lot easier. So making, our clients, they know they have immediate fingertip access to all of their data, all of their contracts in a way that's intuitive and easy for them to understand. That they don't have to, they don't have to be programmers. They don't have to go, they don't have to spend hours and hours in training, but it should be intuitive, and it should be intuitive, it should be obvious, and it should be all access, for them. And kind of a component of that is, when we talk a lot about, data and, and doing more with data. And some of that is a bit of a kind of an emotional process perhaps for people where and I think brokers have to be willing to give more of the client's data back to the client, where we tend to hold it, and we kind of mete it out to them in in the certain forms and formats that that we're used to and we know they're used to. But I think we have to open that up, and we have to kind of trust them back with their data, that and sometimes their data is going to say things that they don't like, but it's important that they get those that they get those messages. And it's important that we're the ones that help them to get this access and get this new understanding to to their data.
Yeah, so you're really saying that you want to be a conduit to that data. You don't want to be a barrier or
Yes,
like
that's
a
right.
sort of safeguarding that holds them away from it. That's interesting. And I think I do think most industries would evidence that people who aren't leaning into this type of, I don't even think it's the new way of doing business, maybe the current way. Like,
Mm-hmm.
like I don't think there's many businesses or industries that have done very well that have lent away from technology. They tend not to.
Agreed.
I think people will always want, as you say, they'll always want things easier, quicker, um, with less barriers to market, and that can present huge opportunities. And I'm sure that's how you're seeing it. That I think people, yes, we are in a COVID world for now, but even when we come out the other side, as we look at 2021, I think there'll be a lot of things that people have been forced, probably quicker than they expected, to move into in the
Mm-hmm.
new way of doing business. Either that's, and I think that's both for staff, for the way that headcounts managed, but also through like insurance, sort of, as you say, maybe documentation, or the way that renewals are presented or
Yeah.
packs are presented. And I think it's a very positive landscape in that regard, that disruption always lends itself to innovation. And I think that's what COVID has done in a huge way to, and naturally it's for the economy and for human life, it's incredibly sad, but we are where we are, and we have to innovate, we have to adjust, and we have to survive as a company, as our company, your company, and in an industry as a whole. So when you look to sort of 2021, and hopefully as we expect life to be returning back to some sort of normality, do you think you'll continue with some of the things that you're already implementing? Are you seeing that businesses will expect that going forward?
I think so. I think, and kind of to your point of a lot of companies being forced to at least take a step towards a more digital infrastructure, even that one step is gonna cause them to want more steps. So they're going to want to see more, like they're going to want to get more out of Teams or Zoom than just a place to have a video call. And I think this is likely to continue, and is likely to increase the demand of brokers, on brokers, to provide some of that, that infrastructure, some of that process, and help the client get better themselves. At least starting with the risk management, kind of function. but help them to be more efficient, to be more collaborative, to get more out of their data. And I think anyone who doesn't do that, and it's going to take some time, but over a few years, I think they're going to, they're just going to get passed by, those who are embracing kind of the digital infrastructure and collaboration, and whether we're calling it the current or the new way of doing things. One of the things that we're very optimistic about is, as we're out talking to prospects, again, these multi-billion-dollar companies, Fortune 2000 companies, we in the space we're competing against very large, established 100-year-old brokers, that you can credibly lay claim to having everything. We can do it. They can say credibly, we can do everything. We have everything.
Yeah.
But one of the opportunities for us is that delivering everything is really hard to do, particularly when you don't have the digital infrastructure or the collaboration processes in place where it's easy to communicate across lines of business or geographies, or bring innovation that's created in one place in the organization through all of the broker teams. So what we hear very often is, our broker does these things very well, and we think it may be hard to match them on these things, things like capacity, getting capacity. Sure, size certainly matters there. Yeah. But on other things, of when we ask them for, hey, what do you know about this? If our broker team doesn't know about it, we don't usually get a really great response, even if there is knowledge of that within that broker organization. So what we're building, and what we think we have, where we think we have a long-term advantage, is we are building those processes into our infrastructure right now. So right now we're only a handful of people, and a few years down the road we'll be 100 people, and hopefully sometime in the future we'll be thousands of people. But so that but because we're building this infrastructure from the ground and building it into our processes, building it into really our kind of the way we emotionally think about the way that we do business,
like
that it shouldn't matter.
Like your company's DNA.
Exactly. So if we have 8 people or 80 or 8,000, if that DNA is the same, we should be able to fairly seamlessly reach across the organization to bring new solutions to our clients, even if me as the broker to that client, even if I don't have the expertise myself. It's easy to find and easy to deliver.
Awesome. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense, and I hope as you continue to scale, that does ring true, because I think you're right. I think that kind of leverage and that kind of DNA can only be good for the companies that you work with and the companies that you serve. As we're kind of coming up, just running up to the rounding out, when it comes to cyber, what are your expectations when it comes to cyber and digital risk in 2021? Obviously, we touched on the aspect of the heightening of remote workers. That's definitely, we've seen more purchases that way. We've also seen a lot of contract requirements. It's something that we've been seeing for about the last 18 months. And most exciting, I think, for people within our industry, we're still seeing first time purchases. And I think for the organization that you serve, I imagine that their buying culture and their thought process will be looking at it far higher if it isn't already on the boardroom kind of the risk list. So I'm very interested, as we just take this to the close, what's your thoughts about cyber risk in the coming year?
I think cyber insurance as a line of business is going to grow exponentially for a number of reasons. Let's start at kind of Main Street, and individuals. Like, everyone's risk has gone up. Obviously, there's industries of hackers that are looking to take advantage of people. And if you've ever known anyone who's gotten their identity stolen, it's like, it's the worst 6 months of your life, right? Until you can get that solved. And now you layer on, particularly with, an effect of COVID, every business is now a digital business. Every business is an online business, right? Your local pizza place has your credit card on file because you don't want to pay cash, and and they used to mostly take cash, and now they mostly take credit cards, and they have all of that in their file. So now they need cyber cover. Moving up to big corporates or municipalities, traditionally their biggest risks have been kind of the mainframe lines of business, their GL, their property, their workers' comp. Cyber has a couple of interesting aspects to it. One, I think, as you kind of alluded to, I think it will become part of contracts. Right now, you lease office space right now, and they say you've got to have X millions of dollars of GL in place, right? Or you want to do business with a new client, you've got to have X million dollars of E&O coverage. I think cyber will become one of those required coverages. So you want to lease this office space, you want to become a vendor, you must have this level of cyber coverage, and it must be this encompassing. It can't be a bare bones policy. It's got to be, it's got to have most of the bells and whistles. And so I think that's going to drive a lot of demand. I think another point that you alluded to, directors and officers. I think cyber is going to become, and it probably already is, the second biggest exposure to a D&O policy.
Yeah.
The first one being, your stock drops precipitously, you're going to get sued.
Yeah.
But I think probably the next most likely thing that happens is you have a major data breach, and now you get sued, and directors or officers who did not put the right protocols in place may get personally sued as well. So I think cyber goes from being kind of a niche line of business, which it was certainly up to very recently, and becomes one of the core lines of business over the next few years. And it would probably there probably have to be a few more losses to kind of open everyone's eyes to to the exposure, both on big corporate public entity, but also kind of on there need to be probably more stories in the press about individuals or small businesses also facing breaches. But as it's required in contracts, I won't go so far as to say it'll be statutorily required places yet, but maybe someday. But certainly as it's required, in contracts, big boom there. And as people, whether that's corporates, public entities, individuals, small businesses become more aware, the demand will continue to increase.
No, I think that's great, and I think that you summed it up really nicely there. I think there's a big change in the buying culture. There's a big change in the claim landscape. We can tell you that, but ultimately, I think it is a risk that people should learn more about. It's going to become more of a standardized concern when purchasing insurance, and hopefully, you'll be there, we'll be there to watch it every step of the way. Kael, thank you so much for taking the time. It's been great to have you on, and we look forward to speaking with you again soon.
Yeah, thank you, Neil. It's great to be on. Thanks for having me. I'll talk to you soon.
Take care.